So let's talk about materials. And before we start out, I want to say that the best materials that you can have are the materials that you have on you right now. So you don't have to look at this and think, oh, I have to go out and get all those same things that Joan has. I really like to do this though, so that way you guys can kind of see like the decisions that I made in case you wanted to go out and like get a specific journal or something like that. So this is just what I have, and this is what works for me. What works for you might be totally different. And also, you know, I have some paints here, some watercolor stuff, and you don't have to use watercolor. I will show you guys how to do that later on. But you know, you're welcome to use colored pencils or crayons or anything that you got going on at your house right now. So one thing that you will definitely need though is a sketchbook. And what I like about this sketchbook is that it's big enough, you know, it's computer paper size basically, and it's also really heavyweight. So that means that it's going to hold a lot of paint and water. So I'd highly recommend something like that if you're going to do watercolor. If you're not going to do watercolor though, you can probably get something that doesn't have cotton in it. You could get something that has much less or none at all. But this is like a really good journal for anything. It's pencil, charcoal, pen and ink, acrylics, pastels, and watercolor. Yeah, this definitely works for me. So, yep, that's the journal. And then moving on, so you're definitely going to want pens of some kind of device to make marks on the page. So I really like these Micron pens, and the reason why is because Micron pens are waterproof. So if I'm going to do watercolor, I want to use something to make lines that isn't just going to get blurred away when it gets wet. And the Micron pens are really nice because they come in a variety of weights. So you can make anything that's like really big to something that's really, really tiny. And that's really good for shading and for making lines and adding in all those nice little details. And then another little fun thing I have is this guy. This is a Pentel brush pen from Japan, actually. And it's really nice because you can make these really fun brush effects because the tip isn't a typical pen, it's just it's a brush. So I think that's like a really cool thing. I love messing around with this. I can do it all day. And then the next thing that you're going to need is a pencil. I have this mechanical pencil. The reason why I like this one is because it can make very faint lines and it's easy to erase. But you can just use any kind of normal pencil that you got, just whatever works for you, whatever you have on you. And then something, I really like having a kneadable eraser. You can use a regular eraser too, but if you want to go all out and have a really fun stress releasing activity, I would get a kneadable eraser. And then for those of you who want to learn watercolor painting, so what I got here, my setup for watercolors. So as you can see, I don't have that many brushes. A lot of people, when they go out and start a new hobby, they go out and spend a bunch of money on things that they don't even know that they're going to use. And I really consciously tried not to do that with watercolor. And it turns out that you really don't need anything but like one brush. If you have like a 10, it's like size 10 brush, and it has this tip here, like you can just do anything with this brush because the tip makes it, you can get those like really small, you can use it to paint small thin lines as well. So you can do anything with a big brush like this that you could do with a little brush. I do like to have a little brush though, just for funsies. And I always like to have this a brush like this. I call this my not so good brush, and this is what I use for mixing the paint. And it kind of wears when you use a brush to mix the paint, it's kind of more, you're being more brutal to the brush. So it's nice to have a brush that I use just for that. And another thing that I have here is a watercolor palette, and you know, this is a fancy thing. I have this one because it's really portable and has a lot of wells in it. But I would highly recommend getting one of these. But if you don't want to, you can just use a muffin tin, and I used that for years, and you know, it never caused me any problems. So you got your watercolor palette, and you know, I have these. So these are watercolor tube paints. A lot of people, they'll see like a watercolor palette with like the, you know, like the little squares. And you can totally use one of those too if you just have one of those like Crayola watercolor trays. That totally works fine. Honestly, the trays are way more portable than having a million of these little watercolor tubes, but this is just what I have, so I use what I got. And then you're going to want to use something for moving. So one thing that I noticed is that I got this little squeeze bottle, but it's really nice for just squirting water here and there and directing it into the palette, and then you can just kind of mix. It makes mixing colors really easy that way. So I like to have something like that. That's just a really good device for like moving water where I want it, but you don't have to be that fancy. And you're also going to want some kind of receptacle for water. This is not very portable because it's glass, but if you get a like yogurt container, something like that works really well. And another thing you're going to want is a disaster rag. So especially if you're doing watercolor, you're going to want something that can mop up quantities of water and paint that you don't want to be there. And also to dry off your brush. So yeah, very important. And you know, again, this is just what I have. You guys don't have to have the same thing. Everybody's going to have their own little studio and have their own little things that they want to use. Whether it's colored pencils, markers, paints, whatever. We're going to use whatever we got. So thank you guys for listening.